My name is Naomi Lockwood. I'm 38 years old. And until that Sunday morning, I used to believe that if something truly ridiculous happened in your life, you would recognize it immediately. You would laugh. You would wait for the punchline. You would know it wasn't real. I was wrong. Because sometimes the most absurd moments don't come with a warning. They come while you're standing in your kitchen, flipping eggs, thinking about your schedule for the day, and your phone rings with your mother's name on the screen. I answered on the second ring, still holding the spatula. "Hey, Mom." Her voice was careful, too careful. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about Dominic." I didn't even look up from the pan. What did he do now? There was a pause, the kind of pause that doesn't belong in a normal conversation. He needs help with a lawyer, a good one. He can't afford it, and we were hoping you could cover the retainer. It's $7,500. I flipped the eggs. One of them broke. "Okay," I said. "What's the lawsuit about?" Another pause. "Well, he's suing someone." I sighed. Of course he was. "Who?" And then she said it. "You." I laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a confused laugh. A real one. The kind where your body reacts before your brain has time to catch up. I looked down at the eggs, then at my phone, then back at the eggs. Waiting for her to say, "Just kidding." She didn't. "It's not a joke, Naomi." Something inside me didn't snap. It just settled, like a glass of water finally going still after being shaken. "My brother is suing me," I said slowly, "and you're calling to ask me to pay for his lawyer. He feels very strongly that—" "Mom," I cut in, my voice calm enough to almost sound kind. "He is suing me, and you want me to fund the person who is going to stand in a courtroom and argue against me. Do you hear yourself?" She started explaining. I stopped listening halfway through the third sentence, because the third sentence contained 5 words I had heard my entire life. He deserves his fair share. And just like that, everything made sense. I turned off the stove. "Tell Dominic to get his own lawyer," I said, "with his own money, if he has any." Silence. "He doesn't," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up, stood there for a moment, then looked down at the pan. The eggs were overcooked, dry, rubbery. I stared at them for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then I exhaled. "Of course," I muttered to myself. "Dominic cost me breakfast too." I scraped them into the trash, added it to the list. 3 days later, I got the call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But I was between meetings, and for a brief second, I thought it might be a supplier. It wasn't. "Ms. Lockwood," the voice said, smooth and professional. "My name is Bennett Hargrove. I'm an attorney representing your brother, Dominic Lockwood, in a civil matter regarding the disposition of shared family business assets." I leaned back in my chair slowly. "I'm sorry," I said. "Repeat that last part." "Shared family business assets." There it was again. That phrase. Carefully chosen, legally dressed, completely detached from reality. "Your brother," he continued, "has retained our firm to pursue his rightful claim to equity in Lock Mechanical, the company you currently operate. He believes he is entitled to a 40% ownership stake based on his contributions during the company's formative years." I closed my eyes, not in frustration, in preparation. 40%, I repeated. "That is correct. Based on his contributions." "Yes." I let a few seconds pass. Then I asked very gently, "Mr. Hargrove, did my brother tell you what those contributions were?" A pause. "He indicated that he worked for the company for several years and was instrumental in its early growth." I smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. "He worked for me," I said, "for 11 months. Silence. "He showed up late 47 times. I documented every single one." No response. "He was written up 6 times. Still nothing. "He crashed a company van into a fire hydrant while texting. The repair cost was $6,200. He never paid it." The silence deepened. "He took a company credit card and charged $3,800 in personal expenses, including a weekend in Atlantic City that he labeled business development. There was no business. There was no development. There were slot machines." I could hear his breathing now. Controlled. Careful. Listening. "He was terminated for cause," I continued. "After he left a job site unsecured overnight. $14,000 in copper pipe was stolen. I have the police report." Still nothing. "I have the termination letter, every write-up, every late slip, every incident report, and a signed acknowledgement from Dominic stating that he received $2,000 in severance, and that he holds no ownership interest, equity stake, or future claim in Lock Mechanical." The silence on the other end stretched long enough to become an answer. I leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Hargrove," I said, my voice calm and precise, "did my brother show you any of that documentation?" He cleared his throat. I will need to review my client's file. You should, I said, and while you're doing that, tell your client something for me. I let the words land slowly. If this lawsuit is filed, my attorney will respond with a counterclaim. I could feel it now. Not anger. Clarity. For $6,200 in vehicle damages, $3,800 in unauthorized charges, and $14,000 in material losses due to negligence. I paused. That's $24,000. Another pause. Plus attorney fees, plus damages. His tone shifted slightly. Are you threatening my client, Ms. Lockwood? I almost laughed again. No, I said softly. I'm informing you of documented facts. A beat. If that feels like a threat, then your client's case is weaker than you think. I ended the call before he could respond. And for a moment, I just sat there, looking at nothing, feeling nothing. Because this wasn't new. Not really. This was just the first time Dominic had decided to put it in writing. And I already knew exactly how it was going to end. I picked up my phone again, called my attorney, before my coffee had time to get cold. Because this didn't start with a lawsuit. It started 15 years ago, in a garage that smelled like motor oil, dust, and decisions that no one else was willing to make. And I was the one who made them. It didn't start with a lawsuit. It started with a garage, a small, dimly lit space that smelled like motor oil, rust, and something else I didn't recognize at 23, but I do now. Desperation. Back then, my name wasn't attached to anything that mattered. I was working for a large mechanical contractor in the city, stable job, $62,000 a year, benefits, structure, the kind of life that makes sense on paper. I was learning everything my father never had. How to read contracts, how to bid jobs, how to run payroll without triggering an audit, how to build something that didn't collapse the moment you stopped looking at it. And then my father called. Naomi, he said, his voice thinner than I remembered, I'm going to lose the company. I didn't respond right away, because I already knew. You can hear it in someone's voice when they've run out of options. Show me the books, I said. There was a pause. Then he said something that should have been impossible. There aren't really books. I closed my eyes. Show me whatever you have. What he had was a shoebox. A literal shoebox. Receipts, invoices, tax forms, stuffed into a worn-out Nike box, like it was just another place to hide the problem. Some of the papers had coffee stains. One had a burn mark on the corner, like it had been too close to the stove. I remember holding that box and realizing something very simple. If I didn't fix this, no one would. I spent 3 weeks untangling the mess. 3 weeks of late nights, spreadsheets, phone calls, and the slow, sinking realization that this wasn't just bad. It was catastrophic. $80,000 in debt, $34,000 in unpaid taxes, $12,000 in overdue insurance. Revenue, $140,000. Expenses, $160,000. He was losing $20,000 a year and didn't even know it because he'd never added the numbers together. I sat across from him at the kitchen table when I told him the truth. You have 2 options, I said. Close the company and declare bankruptcy, or let me take over. He looked at me like I'd just asked him to hand over his name. Take over how? Completely, I said. My name, my decisions, no interference. There was a long silence. Then he nodded. We did it properly. Legally. Clean. The company transferred to me for $1. 1. Not symbolic. Not sentimental. Just final. The paperwork was drafted by my attorney at the time, Bridger. Sharp. Methodical. The kind of woman who didn't trust anything that couldn't be proven twice. She notarized everything. Filed everything. Locked it down so tightly that 15 years later, it would still hold. Dominic was 20 when this happened. Living at home. No job. No plan. Just long nights and longer days doing nothing that moved his life forward. When he heard I had taken over the company, he didn't question it. Didn't challenge it. Didn't even seem interested. He just shrugged and said, Cool, can I work there? I should have said no. I know that now. But back then, he was my brother, and I still believed in things like second chances. Yeah, I said, you can work there. I told myself structure might help him. Routine. Responsibility. A paycheck. Purpose. I was wrong. Month 1, he showed up 3 hours late on his 3rd day. Alarm didn't go off, he said. I docked his pay. He laughed. Month 2, he left a job site unfinished. The client called me. I drove 45 minutes at 9 o'clock at night to fix it myself. I wrote him up. He rolled his eyes. Month 3. The van. He was texting. Of course he was texting. He hit a fire hydrant. $6,200 in damage. I didn't see it, he said. I made him sign a document acknowledging the cost. Told him it would come out of future bonuses. There were never any bonuses. Month 4, the credit card. $3,800. Atlantic City. Business development, he called it. I stared at him for a long time before I spoke. What business? He didn't answer. I canceled the card, made him sign a repayment agreement. He paid $200. Once, then never again. Month 6, he called in sick 8 times. 8. I started documenting everything. Paper logs, dates, times, reasons. Because Bridger had told me something I didn't fully understand at the time. If you hire family, she said, document like you're building a case. I thought she was being dramatic. She wasn't. Month 9, he started talking to the other employees, telling them the company was half his, that our father started it, so it belonged to both of us, that I had taken it, that I was greedy. My lead technician, Marcus, came to me one afternoon. He didn't sit down, just stood in the doorway. Boss, he said carefully, your brother's telling people he owns part of this company. I didn't feel angry, just tired. No, I said, he doesn't. He's pretty convincing. I have paperwork, I replied. He has opinions. Marcus nodded slowly, then said the thing I had been avoiding. You should fire him. I looked past him, out into the shop, at the people working, at the business that was barely holding together. I know, I said. I just wasn't ready yet. Month 11 made the decision for me. The copper pipe, $14,000 worth. Gone. Because Dominic left the job site at 3 in the afternoon and didn't lock the gate, didn't set the alarm, didn't even think about it. I forgot, he said. That was it. That was the whole explanation. I fired him the next morning, in my office, with Bridger there. Not emotional, not dramatic, just final. I handed him the termination letter, then the check, $2,000. Severance, a courtesy, not a reward. Then the document, the one that mattered. I, Dominic Lockwood, acknowledge that my employment with Lock Mechanical has been terminated. I acknowledge receipt of $2,000 in severance. I acknowledge that I hold no ownership interest, equity stake, or future claim in Lock Mechanical or its assets. He didn't read it, didn't ask questions, just signed it, like it didn't matter, like nothing ever really mattered. He took the check, stood up, and on his way out he said, "Whatever, Naomi, this company's going to fail without me." The door closed behind him, and for a second, I just sat there, listening to the silence he left behind. 14 years ago, that was the last time I tried to fix something that didn't want to be fixed. The company didn't fail. It survived. Barely at first. Then slowly. Then completely. Year 1 after Dominic left, $180,000. Still in debt, but improving. Year 3, $420,000. Debt gone. First profit. Year 5, $1.1 million. We moved into commercial work. Year 8, $2.3 million. We expanded again. Year 12, $3.4 million. 23 employees. Hospitals. Labs. Data centers. Every dollar earned. Every mistake corrected. Every system built from scratch. From a shoebox full of receipts. And a decision no one else wanted to make. Dominic spent those same 14 years doing what Dominic does. Different jobs. Short term. Temporary. Always almost something. Never anything real. Borrowing money. Losing it. Starting over. Again and again and again. And somewhere along the way, he convinced himself that what I built belonged to him too. Which brings us back to the lawsuit. Because Dominic didn't come back for closure. He came back for ownership. And this time, I wasn't going to give him anything. Not even another chance. By the time Dominic decided to come for my company, Lock Mechanical was no longer a struggling family business people could romanticize. It was real, solid, profitable. It had weight. 23 employees, 3 service vans, an office building I owned outright, contracts with 2 hospitals, a pharmaceutical lab, and a data center that paid on time and expected perfection. The kind of company people love to call lucky after they weren't there for the years it almost drowned. I was there. I was there when payroll felt like a dare, when I ate takeout at my desk 3 nights a week because every extra hour meant one less thing would fall apart tomorrow. I was there when I learned that saving a business is not one dramatic decision. It is thousands of unglamorous ones made correctly, over and over, while no one is clapping for you. Dominic was not there. Dominic spent those years moving through life like consequences were optional. Warehouse jobs, delivery jobs, a brief attempt at selling insurance that lasted a month and a half because, according to him, people are weird about commitment. A landscaping side hustle that collapsed after he left a mower at a client's house and it disappeared overnight. He borrowed from everybody. My father, my mother, cousins, friends who stopped being friends after the second unpaid loan. He never kept a job longer than 18 months. Never saved enough money for stability. Never built anything that lasted long enough to resent someone else for having more. But resentment, apparently, requires very little structure. All it needs is proximity, a last name, a building with your family name on the glass, a few service vans parked in front, a number in your head that starts to feel personal. 3.4 million in annual revenue. 40% of that company, $1.36 million. That was the number sitting underneath all of this. Not fairness, not family, not old wounds. Math. Greedy, lazy, delusional math. After I got off the phone with Bennett Hargrove, I called Patrick Callahan. Patrick had been my attorney for years. Contracts, lease negotiations, insurance disputes, the kind of legal work responsible adults pay for because they understand that prevention is cheaper than repair. He answered on the second ring. Patrick, my brother is suing me for 40% of Lock Mechanical. There was a pause. Then dryly, that sounds ambitious. He says he's entitled to equity based on his contributions during the company's formative years. Patrick was quiet for about 2 seconds. What contributions? 11 months of employment, 47 late arrivals, 1 wrecked van, 1 stolen credit card situation, 1 negligence incident that cost me $14,000 in copper pipe, and a signed severance acknowledgement waiving any ownership claim. This time his silence lasted longer. Then, he signed a waiver? Bridger made sure of it, notarized, witnessed, filed. Naomi, he said, and now I could hear the smile in his voice. This case is dead on arrival. I leaned back in my chair. Not relieved, just steadier. The waiver alone kills it. Add the transfer documents from your father, the documented cause for termination, and 14 years of zero involvement. No judge with a functioning brain is going to entertain this. Then why did Hargrove take it? Patrick exhaled softly. Because your brother lied to him. Or because Hargrove needed the retainer badly enough not to look too hard. Probably both. There it was again. Not rage. Not shock. Just the exhausting familiarity of Dominic being Dominic. I want to countersue, I said. For what? For everything. Patrick didn't hesitate. Good. We'll pursue the van damage, the credit card charges, the negligence tied to the copper theft, attorney fees for defending a frivolous suit, and I want to explore abuse of process. If he filed something he knew had no merit, we can make that expensive. Do it. He filed the response in 4 days. 22 pages. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just surgical. Every late slip. Every write-up. The transfer agreement from my father. The termination letter. The signed waiver. The police report on the copper theft. The credit card statements. The van repair invoice. 14 years of tax returns showing Dominic had no involvement in the company after he was fired. Attached to that response was the counterclaim. $24,000 in documented losses, $18,000 in attorney fees, $42,000 total. Dominic had sued me, trying to take a chunk of a company worth millions. He was now staring at a bill for $42,000. Patrick called me 2 days later. Hargrove reached out, and? He says his client may have overstated his contributions. I laughed once, without humor. May have. He wants to discuss settlement. What kind of settlement? Patrick's voice turned flatter, mimicking the conversation. Drop the counterclaim, his client drops the lawsuit, everyone walks away. I stood up and crossed my office, looking out through the glass toward the parking lot below. At the vans, at the people moving in and out of the building, at the life Dominic thought he could walk into and rename his own. What did you tell him? That walking away isn't on the table. His client filed a fraudulent claim against a legitimate business during our busiest quarter and cost you time, money, and operational focus. If he wants to settle, he can pay $24,000 plus fees. Cash. 30 days. I smiled faintly. And? Hargrove said Dominic doesn't have that kind of money. Patrick paused, then added, I told him your brother should have considered that before suing someone who keeps records. I sat back down. That afternoon, for the first time since this started, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because Dominic was losing, because the fantasy was colliding with paperwork. Because for once, reality had arrived before my family could soften it. The next day, Patrick called again. Hargrove is withdrawing. I went still. Withdrawing? He says his client failed to disclose material facts, specifically the signed waiver and the documented history surrounding his employment. He can't continue representing someone who withheld that information. I closed my eyes and let that settle. His own lawyer had abandoned him, not because I intimidated him, not because I outspent him, because Dominic lied. And for a second, just one, I let myself imagine what that phone call must have sounded like. Bennett Hargrove, expensive enough to sound confident even when he was wrong, realizing he had been handed a bedtime story by a man who thought charm could replace evidence. I should have known better than to think that would end it. Dominic didn't stop. People like Dominic rarely stop when they should. They just change stories. A week later, Patrick called with the update in a tone so dry it almost made me smile before he finished the sentence. He found another lawyer. Of course he did. This one's claiming inheritance. I stared at the wall. What? He amended the complaint. New theory. He's now arguing that your father's $1 transfer was done under duress, that Hank was ill, vulnerable, and pressured into signing the company over to you. They want the transfer voided and the company assets split between both children. I actually laughed then, quietly. Not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly Dominic. When one lie fails, invent a more emotional one. A sadder one. A version where he isn't lazy or dishonest, just tragically overlooked. My father signed in front of a notary, a witness, and Bridger, I said. That transfer was airtight. Patrick made a small sound. It gets better. Was Bridger really as obsessive as you say she was? She documented everything. Everything? A memory came back so clearly it almost made me stand up. Bridger in her navy suit, her clipped voice, the little camera she used to set up on shelves and filing cabinets before important signings. I blinked. Oh my God. What? There's a video. Patrick paused. A video of the transfer? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Bridger recorded major transactions. She said people rewrite history when money gets involved. Patrick laughed once. I owe that woman flowers. I found the archive file that night. Old label. Old case number. Digital transfer from Bridger's retired office records. I opened it on my laptop in my home office, and suddenly there he was. My father, 15 years younger. Healthier than he is now, though even then you could see the wear in his face. Sitting at a table, papers spread in front of him. Bridger off camera, explaining the transfer. A witness seated to the side. And my father smiling. Actually smiling. Then his voice, clear as glass. I'm signing this over to Naomi because she's the only one who can save it. Dominic can't run a lawnmower. I covered my mouth. Not because I was shocked. Because sometimes truth preserved in time feels stranger than fiction. Patrick filed the motion to dismiss with the video attached. He also asked for sanctions against Dominic's new lawyer, Fisk, for filing an amended complaint contradicted by available evidence. The hearing lasted 17 minutes. 17. Less time than some of my technicians spend diagnosing a thermostat issue. The judge reviewed the transfer documents, reviewed the notarized records, reviewed the video, then dismissed the case. Just like that. Cleanly. Decisively. Patrick called me from outside the courthouse. It's over. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't understand. Because some endings don't feel dramatic when they arrive. They feel quiet. He continued. Judge dismissed the amended complaint and granted sanctions against Fisk, $4,200. Against the lawyer? Yes, for filing without adequate investigation. I sat down slowly. And Dominic? Fisk tore into him in the hallway. Apparently your brother told him Hank was coerced, frail, and confused. Then the judge watches a video of your father smiling into the camera and calling him incompetent. I almost felt sorry for Fisk. Almost. Is he staying on the case? No, Patrick said. He quit in the hallway. By then, Dominic had managed something I would not have thought possible. He had been dropped by 2 lawyers in the same case, both for the same reason. He lied. The counterclaim moved forward. Dominic didn't respond. Didn't hire a 3rd lawyer. Didn't file anything meaningful. Didn't show up to the hearing. And that told me something no one in my family ever seemed willing to understand. None of this had ever been about justice. If Dominic had truly believed he had a claim, he would have fought for it when facts were required. But facts had never been his language. Stories were, and stories only work until someone asks for exhibits. By the time the default judgment came through, I was still at my desk. The office had gone quiet around me, computers asleep, hallway lights dimmed, the glass reflecting back a version of my face that looked calmer than I felt. Patrick's email landed first, then his call. Judgment granted. $24,000 in damages, $18,000 in attorney fees, $42,000 total. $42,000. The number sat there between us. Heavy, precise, earned, not revenge, a receipt. And somewhere, for the first time in his life, Dominic was discovering that the world had finally stopped confusing family with immunity. Dominic didn't show up to court, didn't file a response, didn't hire a 3rd lawyer. For once in his life, he didn't even pretend to try. And that's how the judgment came through. Quietly. Formally. Final. $24,000 in documented damages, $18,000 in attorney fees, $42,000. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just read the document once, then again, then closed it. Because this wasn't victory. It was inevitability. Dominic doesn't have $42,000. He doesn't have $4,000. What he has is a warehouse job that pays $15.50 an hour when he shows up. Patrick handled the next step without needing my approval. Wage garnishment. 25%. Roughly $495 a month after taxes. 7 years. 7 years of consequences for a lawsuit that lasted less than a week in court. My mother called me the same night. I saw her name on the screen and already knew how the conversation would go. Still, I answered. Hi, Mom. Her voice wasn't careful this time. It was strained. Naomi, this is too much. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. $42,000, she continued. He can't survive on 75% of his paycheck. He'll lose his apartment. I closed my eyes. Not because I didn't care, because I had heard this tone before. All my life. The tone of someone asking me to solve a problem I didn't create. He sued me, Mom. I know, but... He walked into a courtroom, I said, my voice steady, and claimed 40% of a company he hasn't touched in 14 years. He's your brother. There it was. The sentence that had been used to excuse everything. Late rent, unpaid loans, broken promises. He lied to 2 lawyers, I continued, not raising my voice, not softening it either. He filed a fraudulent claim. He tried to rewrite what happened with Dad. He cost me $18,000 in legal fees, defending something that never should have existed. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then quieter. Can you reduce it? Just meet him halfway? I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. Halfway? I repeated softly. I sat up, resting my elbows on the desk. Mom, he tried to take 40% of a company worth $3.4 million. She didn't respond. That's $1.36 million, I continued. He came for over $1 million. I let that settle before I finished. I'm asking for $42,000. A pause. That's about 3% of what he tried to take. Still silence. He's getting a 97% discount on his own greed. The words didn't come out harsh. They came out precise. Because precision doesn't need volume. She exhaled slowly. And for the first time in that conversation, she didn't argue. Because there was nothing left to argue with. We ended the call without resolution. We always do. The next day, my father called. Hank, 68 now. His voice slower than it used to be, but still carrying that same quiet weight. I heard about the judgment, he said. I figured you would. A pause. Then, Dominic told me, you pressured me into signing the company over. I didn't respond right away. Because even after everything, that still landed. There's a video, Dad. What? Bridger recorded the signing. You're on camera. You explain exactly why you're doing it. Silence. Longer this time. You're smiling, I added. You say I'm the only one who can save the company. Another pause. Then softer. I said that? You did. I didn't tell him the rest. Didn't repeat the line about Dominic not being able to run a lawnmower. Some things don't need to be relived. I never told him I was pressured, my father said finally. I know, I replied. He made it up. Another silence. Not defensive. Not argumentative. Just tired. He's struggling, Naomi. I stood up and walked to the window. Looked out over the lot. The vans lined up. The building that didn't exist before I stepped into that garage 15 years ago. He's been struggling his entire life, I said. And every time he struggles, someone steps in. I rested my hand against the glass. You, Mom, me, cousins, friends. I took a breath. He's 35 years old, and he's never once had to sit with the full weight of his own decisions. My father didn't interrupt, didn't argue, because deep down he knew. This, I continued, is the first time no one is writing the check for him. Silence. Then, quietly. You're hard. I closed my eyes for a second, then answered, I'm accurate. We ended the call there. No resolution, just truth. Sitting where excuses used to be. 2 weeks after the judgment, Dominic texted me. First time he had reached out directly in 14 years. The message was short, almost casual. You really going to garnish my wages? I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I wanted to say it right. Then I typed, over $6,200 in van damage you never paid. Over $3,800 in credit card charges. Over $14,000 in stolen materials because you couldn't lock a gate. Over 2 lawsuits, 2 lawyers who dropped you for lying. I paused, then added the part that mattered. This isn't about money, Dominic. This is about 35 years of never being held accountable for anything. I watched the screen for a moment before finishing. Welcome to accountability. It costs $495 a month. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared. Then came his response. "You're going to destroy me over this." I exhaled slowly, then replied, "You tried to take $1.36 million from me. I'm taking $42,000. You destroyed yourself. I'm just collecting the receipt." No response. Not then. Not after. And somehow, that silence said more than anything he could have written. A week later, Marcus, my lead technician, leaned against my office door. "Hey," he said, "heard about your brother." I looked up from my desk. "Word travels fast. Small industry," he shrugged. "He really sued you for 40%? Filed paperwork and everything." He shook his head, half amused, half stunned. "And the video of your dad?" I nodded. "On camera." He laughed under his breath. "Your family's insane." I considered that for a second, then said, "My family is my family." I gestured around the office. "My company is my company." A beat. Those two things haven't overlapped in 14 years. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Then, after a pause, $4.95 a month for 7 years. That's rough. I met his eyes. "So, is losing $14,000 in copper pipe because someone couldn't lock a gate?" He smiled slightly. "Fair point." That night, after everyone left, I stayed, alone in the building. The lights dimmed, the hum of the HVAC system steady and familiar. I sat at my desk, surrounded by everything that had once been a shoebox full of receipts and a decision no one else wanted to make. And for a moment, I thought about calling Dominic. Not to forgive him, not to reduce the judgment, just to ask one question. Was it worth it? The lawsuit, the lies, the lawyers, the courtroom, the sanctions, the garnishment. 7 years of smaller paychecks. Was any of it worth it? Or did he just hear the number, see the building, see the vans, and decide that sharing a last name meant sharing the outcome? I didn't call, because I already knew the answer. He saw what I built, and believed he deserved a piece of it, not because he earned it, because it existed, because I existed, because in his world, showing up for 11 months, crashing a van, abusing a credit card, losing $14,000 in materials, was equal to 15 years of 14-hour days, $80,000 in inherited debt, and a shoebox full of coffee-stained receipts. It's not equal. It was never equal. He asked for 40%. The judge gave him 17 minutes. I gave him $42,000 in accountability. And the garnishment gives him $495 a month. Every month, for the next 7 years, to remember something no one ever taught him. Some debts don't disappear just because you want them to. My mother asked me to pay for his lawyer. My brother asked for my company. His lawyers asked for a deal. I gave all of them the same answer. Documentation. Because 15 years ago, a woman named Bridger taught me something that saved everything I built. People can argue with words. They can twist stories. They can rewrite history. But they can't argue with proof. And Dominic walked into a courtroom with a story and found out I had a filing cabinet